Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So is the Conservative Party undergoing a rebrand? Can Jeremy Corbyn cement his grip on the Labour Party? And has Michael Gove just reinvented the political interview? Isabel, let's start with these Conservative speeches. Damien Green, other people talking about the need to do some hard thinking about tuition fees, home ownership, pitch for the young, many other things. That's normally the kind of speeches politicians give when you've lost an election.
And isn't it ironic that it sort of feels like they have lost the election? It still does. I keep having to remind people that actually the Tories got nearly 60 seats more than Labour got. But you're right, you know, this is the beginning, or feels like the beginning, of a repositioning. I wouldn't said that they're embarking on a rebrand, but they need to embark on a rebrand. What was remarkable about the David Cameron years, particularly at the beginning of David Cameron's leadership of the party, was that despite all the efforts he made to modernise the Conservative Party with the pitch on environment and the big society and all of that stuff, is that when you actually continued to poll people about what they thought of the Tories, they still thought that Tories represented the wealthy and were for the wealthy. And it was only Cameron himself who made the difference. That hasn't gone away.
You see, I don't understand how they do this, because to do blue sky thinkings, to have a real rethink of what you stand for, is normally what you do in opposition. It's tougher to do when you're in power. I could see you could do if you had a 100-seat majority and not too much to worry about. But when you're living hand to mouth in a hung parliament, I don't see how these politicians have the bandwidth to survive and do this blue skies thinking.
And they won't have. They will become exhausted very quickly. By that I mean physically exhausted. As the minority Labour government between 74 and 79 became physically exhausted quickly. Also, I think to talk about this rethinking and rebranding implies some sort of coordinated approach. It's not. It's going to be anarchic. You'll get individual ministers reflecting on what went wrong and what they need to do to put it right. And although they sort of technically won more seats, there are a lot more marginal seats now than there were before.
Which is why the Tories don't want another election.
Why they don't want another election, and why they need to rethink as if they had lost. But I think it will be sort of, as I say, that they haven't got a strong leader at the moment in place. It will be frantic and uncoordinated when they get the space to do it.
Very reactive, isn't it? It's just reactive.
And we see them being forced to react to events, both from other parties, like the Stella Creasy Amendment, and from their own party. And they have a leader who isn't just weak, and survival is the name of the game for her at the moment. She's not noted for policy development or policy rethink at all.
She is, actually.
Really?
I'm so sorry to burst this bubble of
it's not a bubble, it's a proposition.
Look at the Tory party manifesto. I'm not saying I backed it or not, but you look at the Tory party manifesto in the election, it was incredibly radical. They have an entire chapter called Intergenerational Fairness, shifting huge amounts of wealth from the old to the young, and actually arguing or solving, or trying to solve, a huge amount of problems that they might have, such as losing the youth vote.
That's the problem. It wasn't actually her.
She was a Prime Minister with her manifesto.
Who thought all that up are no longer there.
That's true. That's true. However,
that is true.
I'm simply saying...
Does the bubble still a bit intact?
It does, because there is a lot of radical thinking going on and has gone on amongst the Tory. The problem they've got is they're absolutely disastrously failing to sell it. The wrong person in charge to sell it. She doesn't look like much of a radical. They've failed to make the point when they were given the chance in front of the electorate. So they need to find a better way of communicating. So reports this morning on developing their own social media offensive, or new people.
Who would have thought that? I mean, it's only been around for about 7 years, social media. Meanwhile, Labour, I think, all the Labour people I speak to on the Corbyn project, they think now they just need to stick to the script. That they would almost fight the next... If the election was before the end of the year, they'd pretty much fight it on the manifesto they just fought.
If there was an election this year, they'd virtually publish the same manifesto.
They don't have to do much more thinking, do they?
Well, I think they do need to do more thinking because they didn't win either, and the context of the next election will be different when it comes. But there's no doubt for now, they feel a sense of small m momentum, justifiably so, in the light of that election result. Now, there are dangers in that. There are dangers of sort of complacency and hubris and all the rest of it, because they didn't win. But if there were an election in the autumn, they would publish the same manifesto with a great deal, or virtually the same manifesto, with some confidence.
Is there any indication yet the honeymoon's over for Mr Corbyn or not?
Well, we saw last week just how much of a discipline problem he continues to have in the number of MPs who backed the Chuka-Umunna amendment.
But he fired the distance this time, and time's gone by, he just had to live with it.
It would be a great mistake to think that there's some kind of real unity in the parliamentary party. The problems that were there continue, and it really depends whether you were one of the Labour MPs who didn't like Corbyn because you thought he was unelectable, and those lot have gone a little bit quiet, or you didn't like Corbyn because you fundamentally disagreed with his policy principles, and those people are still not reconciled to his programme and agenda.
But this is more than Mr Corbyn, I would suggest. The people who run the Labour Party now are from the left, and they're now going to consolidate their grip. Whether Mr Corbyn falls under the proverbial bus will make no difference. They are going to consolidate their grip, and we'll see that at the party conference. And even without Mr Corbyn, this is now a party which is clearly of the left. They're in control.
Absolutely. You heard it there from Richard Bergen, you just interviewed half an hour ago, talking about the need to give members more democratic control, a.k.a. not the MPs, which still are a large rump, a moderate or Blairite, whatever we want to call it these days. So there is an almighty tussle going to go on. Interesting, Jeremy Corbyn had given this very unexpected, semi-victory. He didn't win the election, but he did a lot better than he thought. He had a choice. He could, A, be thoroughly consensual, get people like Yvette Cooper and Chuka-Umunna back onto the front bench and slightly move towards, away from his hard left to the centre, or B, press on undetermined with the hard left vision, and that's precisely what he's doing. And that means, undoubtedly, another bang-on big fresh civil war.
So he didn't bring people like Chuka-Umunna back, and he's not going to. And why wouldn't you? If you've just done, you didn't win, but you've done really well. Much better than sort of 80% of your own party said you would do. Indeed, they were all carping and getting ready for you to fail, so they could move in on you. Why would you not consolidate? You know you've still got a problem with the parliamentary party, but you'd consolidate your control of the conference, of the National Executive Committee, of the grassroots, where you're pretty much in control.
I understood what he did with that shadow cabinet, because in that respect, to have sacked prominent members of the shadow cabinet who had stood with him up until that election, to bring these figures in who hadn't been with him, would have been a sort of act of betrayal, which is not his style. And so I can understand there just wasn't the space to bring them in. Now, whether later on he needs to be pragmatic as well as this conviction messiah figure is a different question. And I think there will be times when he will need to be. In the end, you can't run divided parties, and a leader, one of the responsibilities of leadership is to try as much as possible to bring people together, as well as just crushing them.
I guess my point is that this is a different party. This is not a party that suddenly reverts to where it was after or when Mr Corbyn goes. This is a different Labour Party. That's the point I'm putting
It is
out.
a different Labour Party, and in some ways therein lies the opportunity for the Conservatives, because there is very clear blue water there. But what the Conservatives have totally failed to do is present themselves as a party that offers anything other than misery. You know, a party that offers opportunity, aspiration, and isn't just about making everything harder.
Well, the Daily Mail sketchwriter got it right when he asked Mrs May, aren't you a bit of a gloom bucket, I think was her phrase. Hope I pronounced that correct.
Back to communication. I was just telling you about this. But
I want you to be, we're running out of time, but I want to show you something here which may change the art of the Sunday political interview. Have a look at this.
Are you absolutely clear that our environmental and food standards will not be loosened in any way as a result of leaving the EU and doing free trade deals with other countries, including America?
Yes.
Up until the end of this Parliament, farmers have been guaranteed that subsidies aren't going to come down. After that, it's a moot point. You have suggested that very, very wealthy farmers who get huge amounts of money from the EU at the moment, like Sir James Dyson and others, will get less money under the new regime. Is that true?
Yes.
Is no deal better than a bad deal?
Yes.
Were you very, very surprised to be brought back?
Yes.
Michael Gove, thank you very much indeed.
Well, this could change the art of the interview.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
So you can get different politicians can do different things. Michael Gove is a big character, has a lot of license to perhaps say yes when he doesn't quite mean yes, and we all allow him to get away with it. Someone like Theresa May trying to pull a trick like that, not so much.
It would be nice, in my experience, if she did say yes or no to a question that I asked.
There's nothing new about this. Well, it would certainly make these programmes a lot shorter, wouldn't it, if people just said yes or no? There's nothing new about this, Andrew. I listened to Michael Fallon tell the armed forces earlier this week that, yes, there was plenty of money in their budgets. Doesn't make it any truer.
I'm all in favour of those short interviews. To be more room for the panel then. I mean, you can have these 3-minute political interviews, yes, no, yes, and then half an hour of the panel afterwards. And we'll promise not to do yes or no answers.
But they don't have to stop at yes or at no, but I quite like when someone says yes or no and then explains why it's yes or no. So many politicians of all parties answer the question without giving to the yes or no bit. You just get a river of fudge.
Tom makes a good point. I mean, Michael Gove is newly confident. He's just been reappointed to the cabinet, which he himself said he didn't expect, you know, and is therefore, for the time being, unsackable. And that does give you... Well, they're all unsackable, so they can all do this now. But it does give you a bit more space for that yes or no direction, you know, which could land others, as Tom suggests, in trouble. But he's in a strong place.
I have a feeling it is not going to reinvent the Sunday interview, which may not be a good thing.